Hello and welcome back to the Franchise Growth Pod. My name is Belle, Director of Marketing here at AC Inc. And we are here today on the podcast with Brecon. Welcome back, Brecon. Woo.
Thanks, Val. Great to be back.
I feel like that woo came off like not as excited as I was meaning to do.
It was a sarcastic woo, but it's all good.
It's just too quiet. I need to go louder. Running out of breath.
Woo.
Woo. Just very, very
The
quiet.
saddest woo.
I'm genuinely excited for you to be here. I'm actually very stoked about today's topic. I realize though, it's not really fun when every time we hop on a new podcast, I'm like, I'm really excited about today's topic. People are like, yeah, we get it. You're excited. Like, chill. Maybe the sarcastic woo helped. They're like, is
There
she
you go.
excited? So we're going to kick off. We are going to be talking about SWOT analysis today. Specifically, we're going to be talking about, of course, like coaching franchisees on the SWOT analysis, times where it's useful, how it can be applied, tips or advice for implementing. And I know this is such a great tool to talk about because it's quite foundational, especially if a field coach is coming into a system and starting to work with franchisees, or if you're kind of looking to reinvigorate like your franchisees that you're working with and kind of looking at like, what can we implement that's going to kind of set us back on track, get us like reestablished even in our relationship or in the coaching dynamic. So this is a really great tool to talk about. And I know you're a really big fan of it as well, which is why I'm having you on. But before we dive into all that good stuff, we of course are going to kick off with our icebreaker. So are you ready, Brecon, for your icebreaker question?
Terrified. Fire away.
You're fine. This one is fun. I like coming up with these. Now that I've figured out that I have to come up with them ahead of time, not like in the moment, because that's stressful. This one is, what is your favorite sandwich?
Ooh,
See, this is a good question, right?
man, there are so many good sandwiches out there.
I know. I know. There are a lot of really good ones. Just right
Oh,
now, so you're kind of feel it. Like, just it doesn't have to be. I'm not
am I
gonna.
allowed? This cheeseburger qualify as a sandwich?
I feel like that's a little bit of a cheat, but
Yeah,
I
in
can
which case
you.
I'll go with honestly, pulled pork,
Mm.
barbecue sauce, and the
That's a really good answer. I think I think I might stick with the hot sandwich vibe that you got going. I think mine would be a chicken sandwich, like a fried chicken sandwich with like some slaw, a little bit of hot sauce.
I was thinking also too anything right now with like avocado and salsa. I'm
Yes.
as soon as I hear those two things, I'm like, yep,
Or
sign
like
me.
I have to say also like a veggie sandwich with pesto. I love anything with pesto. So
Oh,
good.
so good.
So good. Okay, now that we're sufficiently hungry, that was
Damn it.
really
I'll be
like
back in 15 minutes. I'm gonna go make
yes, totally. I like that question though, because I love sandwiches. I have realized, I think in the past like couple years, how underrated I always like thought sandwiches were. It was like, yeah, sandwich. I'm obsessed with them now. I eat them all the time. I try to incorporate them into like dinners and stuff. Like, do you guys ever do like I guess a pulled pork sandwich is easy for
Yeah,
dinner.
we did pulled pork on Friday night.
Nice. Ooh,
Yeah.
delish. Yeah, I really need to get back into my cooking game. I've been really off lately. It's a topic for another podcast. Let's dive into SWOT. So I'll let you just do, I'm sure everyone knows what a SWOT is, but just when you were talking about SWOTs with franchisees, just give a quick, like, here's what it's about. Here's what we kind of bring to them. Like just a quick overview, just in case anyone's, new in the
Yeah.
space or, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure everyone knows,
Yeah. So
but
SWOT is an acronym, obviously, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
mhm.
Uh, Most franchisees, I would like, it's so hard for them to do this usually because they only see the business traditionally, they've done a SWOT just from their perspective.
Mm,
And so they're looking at it from a very narrow view of their business when really what we want to do is get a 360-degree view of your business.
yeah.
So one of the big things when we're introducing it to a franchisee for the first time is, that's great that you know what your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and then, we're lucky. We're advisors. We work with lots of different brands, so we hear all different things. We bring all that experience back to the table when we're working with our franchisees. But then, getting a franchisee to identify, okay, you think this. What does your staff think? What do
Mm,
your clients think? What do your referral sources think? Because what does your home office think? What do your peers think? Um, and then they're all like, oh, I've never done it that way.
yeah.
Now suddenly they're getting different feedback. So it's, I actually think that lots of them have done SWATs. Very few have done them properly.
Yeah.
And
I think
so
that's a great way for us to like dive into that topic too, is thinking about, if you brought that to your franchisee, would they immediately think, oh, I need to ask some of these people what they think our strengths and weaknesses are, for example, right? Like, would that be what they would think of, or would they go, oh yeah, I'll just map it out quickly. I'll just jot down some of the things that I think, and then we'll be done. Perfect. Move on. So let's use that as kind of the intro question then to get into when is, as a field coach, or the person who's doing that kind of one-on-one coaching work, whatever you call that role in your system, when is the right time to bring that exercise to a franchisee? Is it like right off the bat when you first start working with them? Is it a regular thing that they have to fill in every so often? What is the bringing it to the franchisee look like?
So just to be clear, there is no absolute answer on this. It depends too. Are they brand new? Because if they're brand new, honestly, I'm not going to do a SWOT with a brand new Z right away. They need to be operational for, 6 months or so to figure out what they're good at and what they're bad at.
Yeah.
Right. So, however, if I'm a new coach into a system and I'm working with franchisees, I often introduce it anywhere in our first 3 sessions. I would say 3 to 5 max, because it gives me a really good, if done properly, it gives me a really good starting point of understanding where their business is at. Um, it gives me that 360 degree again if it's done properly, but I get to look and don't get me wrong, I'm very interested in their strengths, but I am more interested in their weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, because those are the areas primarily for improvement. We can still improve our strengths, but those other areas, yeah. So that gives me as a coach, okay, let's now do a deeper dive on this weakness, on this opportunity, on this threat. And now let's go figure out, and we'll look at KPIs related to that metric. We'll figure out how to measure it. What's our action plan? And now we can actually take steps to improving their business.
Gotcha.
So usually pretty early.
If you're a new coach
sorry.
going in, yeah, like if you're a new coach going in, it would be early, but not doing it as like a brand new franchisee. And then what about like how often a franchisee should be referring back to that or doing it again? Or should a coach be checking in? Like how often do we want to be spacing out? Because obviously, if we did it like every month or something, that would be like kind of
No.
Yeah.
When I was a franchisee, we used to do it annually.
Okay.
And with most of my franchisees now, again, depending on their business, we usually do it annually. What it does is it gives you that foundational. From now, we can build our strategic action plan.
Yeah.
So it's one of the tools we use for building future plans for the rest of the year. And so I want to say I refer to it particularly, but the tools that we build based on the SWOT, we refer to all the time, whether it's a roadmap or a strategic plan or your issues list or the rocks you create based on this. It is the foundation for creating those, but I wouldn't say we refer to it all the time, but the tools we build from it. Does that make sense?
It totally does. Yeah. Like once we have those listed, and again, you having a franchisee go and like have other people weigh in on these, not just what they think and like, 20 minutes mapping out, oh, here, I think this is what we need to get better at, but actually asking like, what is our home office? Like, what are those weaknesses they're identifying or those opportunities they're seeing? Or what about, I love that even like referral partners or vendor, supplier partners, like it's so interesting to think about all these different people who have this view on our business or view on our concept or system. And what do they see as being each of these 4 areas? And then, as you said, not always that you're looking at that document, but you're looking at then the action plan of like, how are we improving the weaknesses? How are we taking advantage of these opportunities and mapping that into the action plans, the accountability charts, all those types of things. And then the SWOT is more like what you go back to when you're ready to kind of redo every year. Like, what are the new things that we want to be putting into those action plans? Is that correct?
That's a great summary, Bill. And yeah, like it's amazing. When I was a franchisee, we used to do, when we did SWOT, we would do it once a year, always in the summer before, because our strategic planning month was August.
Yeah.
So we would do it towards the end of June. And then in July, I would always meet with 2 to 3 referral sources. They knew the call was coming. They knew I was taking them out for lunch, and they knew I was going to ask them, okay, I know what you love about us, but what I really want to know is what do you think we can do better? And what do you think's coming down the pipe for us?
Interesting.
Really.
I love that so much as a franchisee.
Yeah. So we would do those. And then there was always a couple clients every year. I would do the same thing in July. I would take them or, their business partners or whomever, depending on which industry I was in at the time. I would take them out for lunch or buy a coffee or send them a bottle of wine and say, can I pick your brain for 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And then I used to call my home office.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think I'm good at? What do you think I need to work on? And again, between everybody, and then even like, depending on how big your company is, I used to meet with my leadership team And then my leadership team would then go to the people under them and ask them for their opinions too, and bring it back, have it ready for our meeting. So we were getting as
Yeah.
much of a 360 viewpoint as we could.
And it must be so much more validating too at that point if you're seeing like, oh, a lot of people think this is what's coming up. Like these are the opportunities
Not
that
just my opinion now.
seeing. Yeah, it's not just me thinking, oh, this could be good. It's actually a whole bunch of other people going, oh yeah, totally. We see this being, what's coming up for you, or some opportunities to take advantage of. I love that. I do want to ask a bit about the coaching franchisees on SWOT. So we've kind of talked about a couple different aspects of it, like how often to bring it up. It's not the document you reference all the time. It's, it builds the documents that we reference all the time on the coaching calls. But if we're talking about a field coach using this kind of tool, we've talked about when they would bring it to them. So lots of good key takeaways, but any other tips or advice on actually coaching franchisees on it? Like, are there things like even mindset wise about, looking at it, as you said, maybe one of them is just that let's not focus as much on the strengths, right? Like you're going to have a ton and let's get them for sure. But those aren't going to be the things we're going to be really looking at and deep diving into when we're working on things like your action steps or your business plan for the coming year or things like that. Maybe that's one tip, but what are other things like that would be helpful for a coach to know as they're working on a SWOT or bringing a SWOT tool to a franchisee?
I think the first and foremost, and this sometimes is hard, is especially if they don't have a culture of honesty and accountability, is getting truthful answers,
Mm.
either from themselves or their whoever they're getting feedback from. But there's no point in filling out a SWOT with a bunch of BS.
I was just going to say the actual word for that. That's really funny.
Um,
Yes, I agree. Actually, that's a great tip as a coach, bringing that to a franchisee, because I have seen that. Even I don't know if you remember, like in school, you'd sometimes have to do those SWOT things, and yeah, you totally just like list a bunch of stuff. You're like, whatever, but that's not going to get you the results you're looking for. It's not going to actually lend itself to making your business better. You can't just like kind of throw some answers and be like, okay, we're good, let's go.
no, and be honest. Like I remember us doing it with my team, and my team putting down under threats that um, Brecon was too involved in scheduling.
Oh, interesting.
And I was too involved. And you know what? It was taking away from other things. And if
Mhm.
nobody else knew how to do scheduling or payroll, for example, or what, because
Yeah.
a lot of us as owners, we end up trying to do the things we like doing.
Yeah.
It's a threat. It
Mhm.
limits my ability to grow the business because I'm doing these tasks. And also, all our eggs are in one basket. One of the biggest, most common threats I see when helping franchisees, Bev, is what happens if you're in you get hit by the beer truck? Who
Yeah.
signs checks? Who can approve payroll?
Yeah.
Do you have contingency planning if you are out of commission for 6 months or 3 months or 6 to 8 weeks even?
Totally.
Like the first time we did this, and my coach said, "Okay, now what happens if Brecon dies tomorrow to your team?" And we were just like, "Oh,
Yeah.
our business is gone in 3 weeks
Mm.
because no one's working for us if they're not getting paid, and we can't pay anybody without Brecon around." And so, you know, I think looking at it again, being honest, what are we good at? What are we bad at? And as an owner, I used to include what are the things that I need to do better.
Mm.
I had my own personal one that was separate from the business. And I think as a franchisee, that's sometimes a useful tool.
Mhm.
Uh, Other tips for sure, do not give your franchisees the answers.
Okay. Great. Great.
Do
Great
not
call.
let, when they say, what do you think we need to be better at? Well, Jimmy, you tell me, man,
Mhm.
out in your business every day, what would your staff tell me? What would, like, look at it, sit down and think.
Even if, so let's say as a coach, and I know this is such a hard line to balance sometimes, as a coach, if you do know some of the things that you're like, oh, I'm really seeing, like, for example, that's a really
Yeah.
nice, easy one. Okay, this owner is way too involved in the day-to-day operations. If something were to ever, God forbid, happen, even just illness wise, or like can't, yeah, like log on a Friday and do the scheduling for the following 2 weeks or whatever, like, even if it's something like that, that's a clear threat. Like, that's something we need to be looking at. But even if you already have that answer and you kind of know that's something you want to add to the list for an action plan or whatever, you're saying just don't bring that up right off the bat, right? Let them come up with those
Thank you.
answers and then be able to kind of spot, oh, did someone bring that up? Who brought that up, right? Who was, bringing up that honest answer that I knew kind of was going to come up or should come up at some point. So you're just saying that, like, don't bring it up right away, even if you do have a couple things that you think could be helpful.
Yeah, and then at the end, what we can use questions to guide them
Yeah.
to identifying those things, right? Like, the old coaching. Oh, okay. So Jimmy, let's talk about other things. Is there any other areas that you think, like, what would happen to your business if you weren't around? Are there any areas that would be problematic?
Yeah, totally,
Oh,
totally.
uh-oh. And Jimmy's like, oh no, I need to train someone else on schedule.
Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Go get him, Jimmy. Let's create an
yeah.
action.
Why do we always feel like we're talking about like, those old reading books where all their names were Sally
Jimmy and
and
Sally. That's because I'm old, though.
I don't think that's why. I think you just, for some reason, you just think those names are the most common. Yeah, I think that's a really good advice with the not bringing it up and not bringing up any answers as a coach right off the bat, and instead kind of having a list of those so that if you don't spot those on there, you can kind of bring up those questions, kind of guide them in the right direction to make sure any areas you are seeing as well are still on there, but it's not you saying, let's add this, let's add this. It's coming directly from them and their realizations is so smart.
And again, if we set that precedent, they're just going to
Yeah.
think we're going to give the answers all the time, right? And that's not our job.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, such a good difference. I was just doing a little bit of content. Actually, it was a blog post about the difference between like mentorship and coaching. And that's one of those key ones, right? Is like as a coach, our job is not to just like provide, here's what I did, or like, here's the answer that I found. It's the job is to help coach someone to realize their own problems, to help them solve their own problems. Like that we're trying to make everyone else better business owners, not just give some answers as to what worked for us. That's not the job of the coach role.
Yeah.
Awesome. So is there any other last tips? This was so helpful. I feel like just as this is such a common tool, but already I feel like this is really helpful in just kind of thinking of it a little differently. What, how would we bring this to a franchisee? What are the ways we'd want them to fill it in? What are some tips on you as a coach? Like what are some no-nos and definitely some things to bring up when you're bringing this tool to them? All awesome key takeaways from this this episode, so thank you so much. But is there any last things you want to mention just before we finish up?
Yeah, just when you do it, if you do it annually, and that's what we used to do, look at last year's SWOT.
Yeah.
Are our weaknesses still the same? Opportunities, threats, strengths. What's changed? What's gotten better? Where have we stagnated? That is a very useful exercise as well. And sometimes it's incredibly uplifting too for your franchisee. Oh my gosh, these were our weaknesses last year. Look at all the stuff we've accomplished in the last 12 months. That's not there. Check, 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 check. Done. Awesome. Now they can see it. Now the buy-in is coming.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Accountability is coming. Like, oh my gosh, those were our weaknesses last year. We haven't done anything.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, how that could be also a big like kick in the butt in terms of, wow, we didn't like, we had all of this set up. We did the work of like figuring out what the issues were. And yet our follow through wasn't there for the year. And like, we were so worried about the operation side or the day-to-day challenges that we didn't like work on these things that we knew were a challenge last year. That's such a good one. I bet accountability would go way up if you did that again after a year or half a year or whatever. Would be really interesting to see.
Yeah. Without the action plan follow through, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what we write down if we just put it in a drawer.
Totally. That's a good, just, general rule, honestly. Well, Brecon, thank you so much. This was such a good deep dive on this tool. Again, a tool that I know lots of people have used before, but really good insights on how specifically field coaches can use this with franchisees, as it is a little bit different when, again, we're not trying to come up with answers. We're not trying to have it just be this kind of thing to check off a list. We're really trying to have this be the foundation of building out those action plans, making sure we're holding each other accountable and all of those pieces. So thank you so much. That was awesome. Have to have you on again very soon. And everyone who's listening, thank you so much and go be awesome.